we should be live. Yeah, we are live on YouTube. Okay, so cool. Okay, so hello everyone again. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us. It's actually the first. I can hear myself there. Okay, so yeah, first but probably not the last time we meet. We can make this, I don't know, every month or every 2 months to share what's happening in our markets. But we thought that it would be interesting to know what's happening in Europe and in our close regions and in the Baltics and in the Poland, because I'm happy that we with Mateusz, we exchanged emails, and then I got some idea that maybe we could also include the Poland into this webinar, because it's a big market, interesting market, and I follow what you guys are doing as an association. So it would be very interesting to to share our thoughts, and I hope there will be value of this webinar also for our members who are listening, and also for ourselves, for our associations. So I suggest I present briefly agenda that I propose for today's meeting. Everyone should be seeing it on their screens. So you see the 4 usual suspects that were promoting this event. There's more of us now, so very happy that more of us joined. So let's plan 2 hours for today's event. If there'll be a proposal to go for a beer after the meeting, then everybody's welcome to take the chance. Okay, so to the serious part, I suggest 6 topics. Maybe we'll try to split them or merge them, some of them. But I'd like to begin with the general situation of real estate market, how you see it, what's with the every segment of the market, housing, retail, offices, how it's changing, what about the prices, what about the volumes, what sectors are mostly affected. We can discuss and share opinions. Then about the financing, the bank policy, how it's changing, is it good, is it bad, what's in the future, what do you hear talking to your banks, about the alternative financing, is there a place to step in for alternative money, peer-to-peer lending, and so on. Also, what's very important in this quarantine time, because we must not forget why we gather here. We gather standing before the common challenge, the virus, the coronavirus, and the quarantine that's affecting our economy because of that. So how are governments dealing with that? We are following that very closely. We hear what's happening in the Polish market regarding the retail regulation. We hear what's happening and what associations are proposing in Estonia. Also, Latvian experience is very interesting. I could share our experience working with government. Maybe this will give you some ideas, and of course I can share these proposals and ideas, how we work with you. Maybe this will help. And of course, let's look into the future. What's waiting for us in every sector? How it's going to change? How e-commerce is going to change? How logistics is going to affect all this retail, commercial sector? How it's going to change? Let's look into this future after this mist disappears. So I remind you that we're streaming on YouTube. The link of our stream, those who could not join on Zoom because of the limit to 100 participants, you can find on our LinkedIn, on our association's LinkedIn page. Please go there and use the link. And okay, so I think we can move on. As we talked, maybe let's very briefly introduce each of our organization. Who do we represent? Who is our members? What type of companies are our members? What are our goals? Maybe I suggest we start with the guest from Poland. Konrad, maybe you would take
Thank you so much. Konrad Płochocki, I'm Managing Director of Polish Association of Developers. We are organization of 200 developers companies. So we do not represent any consultancy agency, any lawyers, or any supporting business, I would say. Mostly residential, however, we represent most of the markets, including offices, retail, industrial, and some warehouses. So pretty much most of the market, and we represent around 65% of all resi stock on the Polish market. Microphone.
We can't hear you.
Sorry, because I have a phone
I
for
have
our
muted
members.
myself.
I have muted myself,
I
and I have a call from my colleague, one of our members, that he can't join. So what was the question? Sorry.
I was addressing to Martins, so I was giving the floor to, after the Polish, to Latvian.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so the floor is mine now, yes? Okay. Hi, my name is Martin, and I represent the Alliance of Real Estate Developers of Latvia. So basically, we are an organization which represents specifically real estate developers. So basically, we span all the sectors of the real estate with a focus on residential and offices. But also we have as our members companies active in hotels and industrial. So we don't have what was the Polish colleagues have 200 members. We don't have such a number in Latvia, say, but still we are pretty representative of the Latvian market. So yes, and I have joining me today is my colleague Ivars Pommers from ELLEX, which is you know a distinguished legal office, and Ivars is the head of real estate practice.
Okay, nice to meet you, Ivars. Okay, so Ardi, over to you.
Hello,
Estonia.
everybody. Ardi from Estonia. I'm the representative of the Association of the Real Estate Companies of Estonia. We don't have different unions for developers and real estate companies, so we actually gather everybody under one roof. It's still dominated by the agencies and the consultancy firms because it was historically formed by the agencies sometimes back in the early 90s. And we gathered together something like 50 plus members, which comes from to 60 sometimes. And all the major agency, all the major players are there, plus now also the fund operators, developers, etc., etc. So quite widespread, both residential and commercial properties. This is what we do.
Okay, thank you. I'll talk about our association. So I'm CEO of Real Estate Developers Association for Lithuania. We are counting 16 years in the market, and we represent biggest, and not biggest actually, all who wants to join this community players of the market, both the residential, commercial. We also have service companies like lawyers, 3 lawyer companies, and actually even 1 commercial bank. So we try to gather all of them under our roof, and by this create the synergy, trying to make the conditions of the real estate business as good as possible in our market. Yeah, and we're trying to be active internationally. Ardi knows that. Martins, we have created some joint ventures under the FIAPCI wing, then organizing some conferences in Latvia, Estonia. So my wish is that we also establish a great gateway also with the Poland, because it's a big market, interesting market. We even thought about doing a study tour to Warsaw this summer. Maybe it will be possible. Who knows? In August or so.
Feel invited.
Oh, thank you. We did a tour like 2 years ago to Warsaw. It was impressive.
So now you'll be able to see what has changed. Yeah, so probably this will give us an option to bridge our countries, bridge our markets, and maybe this will lead to some common understanding and to some help with facing the challenges that we are facing currently. Okay, so if you let me, I'll move on to our.
Maybe I will introduce myself as well.
Anton.
Yeah,
of course.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay, my name is Anton Nikitin. I manage a group of companies, EcoAdvice and ProAdvice. I'm from Estonia. We deal with property development, mostly residential, but right now we have some mini office projects, and we cooperate with Ardi as well. And ProAdvice deals with advisory in construction and energy efficiency questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in a few words.
Thanks.
Good.
You muted again.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. So Mateusz and Ivars, you could introduce yourselves as well.
Hello, my name is Ivars Pommers, and I'm head of real estate practice in the law firm ELLEX, and we are also advising to the Latvian Alliance of Real Estate Developers for already 3 years. I think our cooperation has been very good, and we've been doing pretty much of lobbying activities with the government and ministries recently. Before the virus, I think we had weekly sessions in the parliament on different matters.
Okay.
So Konrad already presented Police Association of Developers. I'm also from the same association, Mateusz Stachewicz. Hi.
Okay, hi. So everyone is introduced. Everyone who's listening to us knows who we are. So okay, so maybe I'll start with the first topic that I suggested about the general situation of the market. I'll give a few minutes of my thoughts, of our member thoughts, and then I'll probably pass on to Konrad, and we can do this round the same way. So the beginning of a quarantine in Lithuania started 16th of March. As we talked before, it's probably more or less the same in all the 4 countries, plus minus a week or so. So the first hit was, of course, on the retail, on the commercial real estate, because the quarantine was obligatory to close the stores, close the shops, and some services like sports and so on. So it was a big hit for the market. We took second hit when the notaries rejected to work. Actually, they wrote to the Ministry of Justice that they're not feeling safe, and they would like to not work during the quarantine. You know what it means for the market. Everything stopped. Fortunately, together with other associations, we were able to convince the government to renew, of course, as safe as possible, to renew the services of the notaries. So just 4 days were cut out of their work. And of course, second thing, that all the commercial real estate renting companies and people, the second day of quarantine, they wrote the letters to their landlords saying that, sorry, I cannot pay. My business has stopped, and please let off of my rent. I mean, not postpone, but I'm not able to pay, and I will not pay. So that was also a big issue. That this week we have reached some type of preliminary agreement with the government. How we're going to solve that? Maybe I'll talk about this later in the governmental topic phase. But we're trying to push forward. I think the model is close to Swedish-Danish model. So I think that this will be a big help. Housing market. What regards the volume has dropped 3-4 times just over the first 2 weeks. Also because of the notaries, of course, but later on it was just the expectations of people, of buyers,
Volume of sales, you mean, yes?
Volume of deals, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Volume of deals, because those who were signed preliminary contracts, they were moving on, going to notaries and finishing their contracts. But those who were just made the reservations, they paused actually. For how long, nobody knows. But they're not canceling their reservations. Just a few of them out of few hundred. Probably, but they're looking forward what's going to be, how long the quarantine going to last, and what's going to, of course, the most important, what's going to happen with their jobs. If they have if they have the job that's not affected by the quarantine, then it's okay. But if they're in a chain of works of jobs that's going to be affected maybe later by the quarantine, then that's quite a challenge for them. So, and yeah, we have received the latest data just probably 2 weeks ago about the first quarter. So the first quarter of 2012 is not so bad, but it was because of the February was the record month over the probably 12 years or so. Because on in Vilnius, in our not so big market compared to, let's say, Warsaw or Riga, in terms of residents, it was. There were like 600 or so over 600 new apartments. So for us, it's a big thing, because only 2 years ago it was like 300, 400. So it was a big thing over a month. So over a quarter, it was close to 1,500 probably. So yeah, but everything changed in the middle of March, and these numbers are not interesting and not actual anymore. Of course, hotels stopped. Some of them changed to the quarantine places. Some operators said, okay, we will rent for the government, or we will give just without any payment for the government to quarantine the people who are returning from abroad. So this saved some cash flow for them, but it was for a very short time. Now most of the hotels are closed, and we are not sure what they are going to open, because it has a close connection to the flights, and the flights, they are just canceled. Everything is canceled. So domestic tourism, of course, maybe will grow in summer times in the seaside, in our near the sea, in the towns, but otherwise it's going to be a big challenge for this hospitality market. What else? Retail. Yeah, I've talked a bit about the retail. So now is the listing. Just yesterday, our government announced that it will let reopen some type of retail stores that have entrance from outside, and they can assure the safety. So they're gonna have disinfection, possibility to disinfect your hands. You have to wear these things entering. Actually, it's obligatory to wear it in the public. I don't know how it's in Poland, Latvia, Estonia. In Poland, yes. Estonia, Latvia, no, unfortunately. Yeah, so now it's obligatory for a week or so to wear it. Yeah, and like that, you can enter to the shops and do some outside coffee shops. Probably will open some smaller ones, but for the shopping centers, it's still closed. I think up to June, probably more or less to June. So that's my short insight. I don't want to take over so much of your attention. So Konrad, maybe you could take over from here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So basically, the size of the Polish market is bigger. It's about 120,000 apartments a year. So I believe Warsaw is bigger than the whole Estonian and Lithuanian market together. It's 25,000 apartments a year. So basically, we've seen pretty much the same situation as you did. Our sales dropped down by 70% within the COVID time, so during last month. Of course, the agreements that were signed, the preliminary agreement that had been signed before they were continued, and the clients, most of them signed the final agreements or did not withdraw from the agreements. However, right now we are seeing about 30% of sales that we've seen a few months ago or 2 months ago. The new interest of clients is still there. Of course, they are not concluding the agreements, but we've seen the rise in the number of viewers on websites within the first 2 weeks of the quarantine. In next 2 weeks, this number didn't grow anymore. So I guess people did something else at homes. But we are seeing some optimism coming back to the market, and we are seeing more people viewing our websites again this week. However, for sure, it will not be concluded into the agreements, as they will have problems with banks. Prices. Officially, the first quarter of 2020 was very good, and the prices rose in whole quarter. But at the same time, the data for last month, for March, official data showed a small downturn in prices by 0.2% in the new apartments, for the new apartments. But to be honest, that's because for the first 2 weeks of March, we still had sales going on normally. So the COVID hit in middle of March, and then we've seen total lockdown, and we've seen the whole market to be stopped. So right now, for most of the developers, they are not officially changed. They have not officially changed the prices of the apartments, but obviously, if their clients ready to sign the notary agreement, the preliminary notary agreement, which means that basically the sales is concluded and the possibility to withdraw from such notary agreement is very, very limited. The salespeople are pretty much entitled to lower the price by a few percent if they will get the client to sign the contract right now. The notary services are very limited, but they start to work again. So they were not stopped at all, but some of the notary offices stopped. Now they are start to reopen. Probably next week, some of them will reopen, so it shouldn't be problem anymore. Hotels, of course, hotels are closed for last month, and that's the worst situation in for the whole real estate market. The same is with the student housing. Student housing owners are not that worried, but the hotel owners are very worried what will happen next. They will probably we'll probably see some bankruptcies, I would expect, because for sure during 1 or 2 months the situation will not come back to more normal, and that's a very big risk. Shopping malls, big shopping malls are closed, and some of the services such as hairdresser are closed too. For shopping malls, there has been introduced a very strange regulation that basically the shopping mall owners are not entitled to ask for any rent or any service payments for the time of a lockdown. That means that basically they are not receiving any money, even for the electricity, for water, or anything like that. It's very strange. Probably it's going to change within next week or 2 weeks. But for last month, they're not getting any money, which is a huge problem for them. In exchange, if the tenant wants to be released from these payments, they need to offer extent of the lease for the time of a lockdown. So basically, it's some kind of a release for the owners, but of course, it's very unfair, I would say. So most of the burden of this COVID is put on the owners of the shopping malls. Then you ask about office lease. Well, basically, of course, most of the transactions has been stopped. The one that been already started are continued if some companies has to sign the agreements for next month. However, the regulation is that if any lease would expire during the COVID time, then it's automatically extended till 1 month after the end of the COVID lockdown time. So we are seeing some transactions, but basically most of them are stopped. And yeah, pretty much that's all, I guess.
Okay.
In that point.
Okay, thank you very much, Konrad. So who's next? Martins?
Okay. So yes, I mean, to start with a general remark, I read a sort of analysis of the how this COVID thing affects real estate currently, and a term which sort of impinged on me was that what we are currently experiencing is a cash flow depression. So basically, it's not like a kind of structural depression when something is deeply wrong with the sector, but there is a sort of near-term cash flow issue. That's kind of a sentiment shared to a certain degree by our members, too. What I find in speaking with our members in particular is that it really is down to what type of real estate you are in, how this crisis affects you. For instance, those who own, let's say, warehouses or logistical objects, they're doing pretty much fine. But those, of course, we have, for instance, a member who owns a hotel and some street retail shops. That's basically, that's it. Basically, cash flow has stopped completely. Regarding offices, let's say our members are such that normally have as tenants, let's say, these blue chip companies, you know, like starting from Microsoft down. and what they're reporting is basically an interesting fact. For instance, so basically the rental agreements are on, so the service is provided, so offices are open, people can come in, and they even can legally come in because there is no full-scale lockdown. But obviously only, you know, 10 or 20% of people show up. So, and this in a midterm will lead to an obvious question: would they about the renegotiation of the lease agreements and so. So regarding apartments, it's interesting. It's very much the same, that those deals that have been, you know, signed or had started before the COVID hit, they are pretty much going through. But obviously there is so just imagine if you want to buy an apartment today. I mean, even if the bank is ready to give you a mortgage, you're not sure that you will have a salary in two months' time. It's just, and it kind of stands to reason that people, even if they can get a mortgage, they wouldn't take it because it's a very sort of fragile environment. And yes, so. Regarding apartments, that some of our members have stopped some of the new projects. There were 2 projects that were about to start, but they halted the construction because of this. And also there is a pressure from customers regarding discounts. For instance, it's just like a good style now to demand a 30 or 40% discount, which obviously sort of, let's say, our members, which are institutional developers, will not give, because they can hold on to properties like midterm or long term. But obviously those who you simply had to sell the apartments is within, you know, 6 months, they are in deep trouble. But these are not our members. Yes. So so basically that's a kind of the short of it. figures show that apartment sales are down like 50-60%, but regarding offices, again, that's a very interesting situation, that basically the service is being provided, simply companies are not using it. And what we managed to avert was that there was an idea of the government to declare that this emergency situation would be legally considered force majeure regarding the lease agreements, and that was something which really made our members very sort of edgy about this. So, but we managed to avert that, and it's not the case currently. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ardi?
Okay, by the structure.
Martin,
Yeah.
Can I have one question to Martin? Could you say, do you see like what's the number of sales in apartments, if there's still any? If you have data on that.
What's the number of sales? Well,
what's the drop down by percentage?
You mean, so I mean, I'm even let's say reluctant to tell you the number of new apartments which are being developed in Latvia. It's about 1,500 annually. So basically, if you compare it to the first quarter, that would be like some 600, 650. It's down to 300, 250 around approximately. So basically, I don't want to complain about Latvian situation there. So, but the numbers are 50-60% down, and basically that's a sort of overlap the heritage of the pre-crisis agreements being followed through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, bring in Estonia. Yeah, but the structure Mindaugas started when talking about apartments, then overall sales in March was 1,790 apartments overall in Estonia, which actually is still on a very, very high level. So as the crisis started in March, we actually didn't see any decline on there in the month of March. But there was a lot of expectations that sometimes in April or next month we'll see up to 50% decline on the transactions. Luckily, the notaries have been able to have the digitalized systems up, so transactions can be signed even without showing up at the notaries, and that's preserved some part of a market, and that's one of the good things which we have here the digital state, so that has saved some of the sales. In Tallinn, particularly, there was in March there was 970 roughly transactions on apartments, and that's about 20% down, and that's only on a half a month, which means in April probably the 50% expectation is quite solid. In the rentals, we have seen 20-30% decline, and that's mostly because there was a lot of tourist-based short-term lease apartments on a market, which were counting on a tourist flow which had been growing throughout the last years or constantly, and that has virtually disappeared. So that market has now turning into long-term rents, and which probably won't be a short-term change. A lot of the apartment owners will realize after making figures that the long-term rent is actually a better business than the short-term rent, but they never thought about it up to this moment, because you cash in something, but you don't evaluate your free time and the effort you put into the short-term rents. So that's something which probably will change. And then which is good news for the hotels as far as they will be able to get back to the markets again. And on commercial side, we have seen pre-planned larger rental agreements still closed, because when you talk about volumes rents from 1,000 square meters and up, or say even from 500 square meters up, they are made on a certain forward look. So they keep on doing, and people are still expecting this crisis to be short term. We'll see how the effects will be. So the commercial market has not seen this much of a decline. First wave obviously was very, very emotional. There was a lot of tenants who returned with requirements of reducing the rents from the very first days, and that was mostly on emotion. Well, obviously not talking about the tourism and food and beverage and catering businesses. So restaurants, yes, they were closed. Hotels out of business, etc., etc. That's the tourism sector has been one of the hardest hit sectors right now, and plus to that also the fitness halls, etc., etc. So there are certain segments which have had it harder, but what makes it this crisis particularly different is that every segment has been hit at one time, because people have been locked down in homes. So you can't, even if you want to do something, you can't go out. So we'll see April figures, and then we'll see what's happening on the market. But we expect on a certain logic that if the economy falls, say 10%, then the real estate market usually falls 20%. It's a twofold effect on the real estate. But as Estonian market is small, the effects will probably be short term as well. So we have really big expectations that something else will be done. I'm not a very big believer into the governmental measures, because they will take time, and the crisis is here already. So for some of those small companies, it will be very hard to survive. Probably a lot of them won't. And what comes to the salaries, then in real estate segment, most of the agencies use people on agency agreements, which means they don't have salaries. If you don't have salary, you don't have unemployment security, which means you will not be liable for programs which are given through that system. So that'll be very hard. The only way to work money is make deals, and this is something that what people will need to do, and that's reality on the real estate market. From the bank side, the reaction has been quite sudden, and I would say mostly actually positive, because they have tried to find ways to help the segment, and given the holidays for principal payments, etc., etc. If it's enough, I don't know, because in some cases where the rent disappears 100% for a certain period, obviously, the interest payments is also over the capabilities. But that's up to the owners of the real estate to negotiate and discuss and agree with the tenants how well can they survive. And that's obviously one of the monetary obligations. Martin, you mentioned the force majeure. And that's a limitation. There is a limitation on monetary obligations, and that probably won't be that easily implied to these agreements anyway. So we'll see. There will be a long chain of indebtedness in a chain of rents and transactions. So we'll see how long it solves and how hard it hits. But definitely will have about 20-30% decline on the market for a certain period, and we hope to recover closer to the end of the year, but probably will lag on longer, depending how long we'll be home. So that's the picture.
I will add several words about Estonia. Yes, about the banks that, banks right now are ready to finance individuals to purchase apartments, but they're checking what is the business where people work, and they make decisions based on that. Yes, because they check if this sphere of activity or company a person works in is sustainable. Yeah. So another thing with the bank is that They say that right now banks don't eager to finance residential development. It's on pause. Yes, it's how to say, let's see, be calm, check what is going on, and let's speak after 2-3 months. Yeah, but from other side, it's the same with property developers, that there are ongoing projects and everything is fine with this with them, and nothing has been stopped, etc., etc. Because there are some obligations to sell, to build apartments, to sell them, etc., etc. But with new constructions, I mean that have not started in pre-sale or in this kind of stage, yes, or in the stage of groundwork. With this, a lot of projects stopped, yeah. And again, it was said that it was stopped for, let's say, 2-3 months, and then we see what will happen. Yeah, and I think that's all about the development side. And it's the same with the commercial as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Ardi, the quick one. You mentioned the e-notaries, like electronic notaries. Is it possible to make to confirm the agreement digitally currently in Estonia?
Yes.
Making a real estate transaction?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And they have had the face recognition to that. So you sit on the computer and you give the face recognition. So you will be home and have a meeting like we have right now with the notary. So have it parallelly. So this is what it is.
Does it have any,
there's a lot of aspects.
Does it have any limitations, like for the amount of a transaction or so? Or
not yet. It's not that broad spread anyway. Mm-hmm. And the decline in transactions is really serious. So we haven't faced any problems. At least I haven't heard about problems in the capabilities of this network.
But it started just the quarantine time, or it was introduced?
Yes. It wasn't necessary. Well, there has been pilots for a long time, because face recognitions, banks are using it for some time already. You can open a bank account with face recognition since last year, I think. Okay. So we have had an opportunity to test these things for more than a year now. So they are real, they work, and now they just implied on the notarized agreements. So that's quite fascinating, actually. But real estate is, much more than just online signing the contract. There's sightseeings which need to have been on 3D or virtual reality, whatever. If you don't go to the place, it's very, very difficult anyway. So it's temporary measure, I would say. Maybe it will be standard in the future, but it involves physical presence as well. So there are many aspects.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question to Ardi? Yep. Could you tell us, the face recognition, is it connected with any official government database of the face recognition, for example, for passports or identity documents, or how does the face recognition work? I believe it's not only the one that we have in smartphones, but probably it's combined with some database which is held by the government.
It's application. It's an application, but it's not a governmental application. It's the private application which now is added to the e-government solution. So actually, because we have virtual identities anyway. We have the e-state, which involves everything online, pretty much from the public services. So that was just one thing which is now attached to this capabilities, functionalities, so to say.
So at first you need to go to the government and get your e-personality confirmed by the official state.
It's automatically when you apply for a ID card, you get that. So you will be able to use the online governmental services there.
But who does the recognizing? Is that a person who recognizes you, or is it automated?
Person.
The person. So the real notary on the other side of the link.
Yes.
And it's basically just okay.
If I can add,
if you look at the bank agreements, then usually one thing what they require what any environment requires, that you have your face and your own ID on the same picture, so a person can ID you, and that's the simplest way on the apps. I think the functionality will be better in the future, but then now we have a boost with the help of this virus, obviously.
Okay.
If I can add, then doing notarized things via video conference is available in Latvia as well. I have never tried how it works, but it's combined also with electronic signature. So you would sign the document by electronic signature and then have a video conference with the notary where they would check your, I don't know how they do the face recognition function, etc., but they would ask you questions whether you signed it voluntarily, etc. So this is possible, and this was not related to the virus. That's a new development that was introduced a year ago or something, but it's not very popular. Probably could become popular now.
It probably will become more popular now with the necessity.
Yeah,
but
they started,
it's called it's an app called Verif, and it's actually broad spread.
Yes, Notary started with offering this digital how to say distance notarization on the 6th of April. Yes, it's right now it's on the second week. But also there are some open questions. For example, not everybody has possibility to sign the document digitally. So right now, notaries are discussing how to do that. For example, one seller can sign digitally, buyer cannot sign digitally. So there might be some kind of system of offer to sign an agreement. Within some time, you come to notary and sign. Then after another party signs digitally, and that notaries say that okay, it's unusual for them as well. Yeah, and there are many practical questions right now. They were thinking to implement the system step by step, but due to this virus, they decided to do it right now and then solve the question.
That's a great news. Actually, for us, it's very important, because in Lithuania, we just introduced the law on notaries, and yesterday we had a discussion in the government with the Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice, because Minister of Justice introduced this law, but he's not sure about it himself because of the safety thing, and is your will really your will, or somebody is standing with a gun 5 meters away, and so on. So that's very important to know that Estonia has pushed forward, and that's what we are encouraging them to do. Let's push forward, maybe for smaller transactions, maybe between the not with the between the people, but between the companies, the legal bodies. So let's try. Let's push forward, and we are working on that, and we have made some of our remarks regarding this law, because for 2 years they have been talking about this system, and now this quarantine thing is pushing them forward. So that's very important. I think I'll get to you Estonian guys a bit later to talk about the system. Maybe you could give me some links, because I want to introduce this to our Justice Ministry, because they say that, oh, we're going to be like pioneers. We don't know how everybody's doing. So if there's a practice already, that's very good.
But I think Lithuanian digital ID is probably one of the first which is actually accepted by our state government network. So in some places, when you log in with the Estonian digital ID, there's possibility to choose either Estonian or Lithuanian, or what you want to sign it. So you do have the system. That's for sure. Some countries like Belgium and Lithuania, and I can't remember the list. I'm not a specialist there, but I know there are unified digital ID protocols which can be used cross border as well.
Okay, so it means in the future we see that a notary in Estonia signs the deals made in Lithuania or Latvia. Yeah?
Oh, yes. No, I mean, but in Latvia we have, I mean, notaries. Ivars is very keen on that subject. Notaries are a very strong and powerful lobbying group. For instance, we have our new law on residential tenancy, which we are helping to push through, And the idea is that people can just sign their rental agreements electronically using e-signature and register them with the government in order to be able to use the let's say, so in order to avoid a situation when if the tenant doesn't pay the rent, you have to go through all the legal procedures, and it takes up to 3 or 4 years just to vacate the apartment. So I mean, and that was so connected, and this was before the crisis. We had this discussion in the parliament. The notaries are lobbying very much, and so but it feels like there was a company called Kodak who manufactured these photo machines, and they see that iPhone is coming in. They just want to stick to their business. So yes.
Yeah, and I can add that in Latvia, there's no problem to sign millions worth and transfer millions worth company shares with electronic signatures. But for some reason, like an apartment in a rural area, that would be like 5,000 euros worth. That's a taboo. There has to be a notary, and there is probably people standing with guns behind your screen, and that's not possible. So it's a heavy fight, but I think it's developing because some of the real estate registrations are added that can be done. For example, banks can register the mortgages or delete the mortgages with electronic signatures and so on. So this is an ongoing process, and the notaries, of course, are fighting for their jobs, but I think the progress cannot be stopped. So we are moving pretty much towards electronicization of all the procedures.
Okay, so let's move on because it's nearly 1 hour and we just talked about one topic, but I think we've touched a few of them in our remarks. So about the sectors which are mostly affected, I think some of us have touched on that. Of course, one sector that I probably didn't mention is this student housing and co-living sector. That's actually it's growing currently in Lithuania, but it took a big hit because foreign students live in this student housing apartments or projects that developers are making their business model on, but they have all returned to their country, so all of them are empty. So temporarily you can use it for quarantization of some people, but in the end it's quite difficult. But I think the sector should come back quite quickly after the universities open up, and probably in the autumn it's going to be good news for them. Co-living or short-term living projects, yeah, they are now transferring to the long-term living, and then probably will be competing with the hotels more and more. Projects. So yeah, they are now. Yeah, so nothing more to say different things than probably in your country. Okay, so let's maybe move on to the financing. That's interesting thing. Maybe I will start a bit.
Can I have one more question regarding the first topic? Could you guys tell if you have seen a situation where the clients wants to withdraw from the signed agreements, whether that would be the residential agreements or that would be office lease or retail lease, due to the force majeure? Do you already see that movement in your market? And obviously, in terms of the residential, do you see that if you see any situations of that, it's just the hope of the clients that the prices will decline in the future and they will be able to buy it cheaper? Do you have the situations already?
I can tell from our country's perspective, we cannot apply force majeure to this because it's not an extreme situation, because we have our Ministry of Economy and Innovations has put out the opinion that force majeure is applied if if you are in extreme situation. We are not in an extreme situation. It's just how they call it. I forgot how it's called in England, but in English, extraordinary. Yeah, it's extraordinary situation. So it's not extreme, and force majeure does not apply to that. So some of the tenants try to play on that, but no. Regarding the people drawing off from housing contracts, not the case so far. Probably this will grow because in some cases the reservation is just a few €100 or €1,000 or so. So if the person goes to the bank and the bank says, sorry, we cannot give you because you are in the risk, your job is in a risk zone. So what the person has to do, if it doesn't have money, he has to withdraw from the reservation as well. So there will be probably cases of this type in the housing.
Mm-hmm.
I can comment for Latvia that the only question we as a law firm received during first weeks of the crisis was, is this a force majeure? Can we not pay rent, or do we have to give the rent release? Can we stop paying bank loans? And in all directions, both from tenants and also from landlords. And this is a hot topic also so far. In the first weeks, maybe the issue was not about termination of the agreements, but now we also see some situations where some shopping centers are about to open, but the potential tenants say that they are reconsidering their business plans and they are seeking for possibilities maybe to withdraw from the binding rent agreements. The specifics about Latvia is maybe that before maybe a couple of years ago, there was not a tradition that there are really long-term binding contracts. They were long-term, they might be long-term, but the tenants had pretty easy termination conditions. So I think even despite the legal side of this, of course, the retail will suffer quite heavily, and the landlords will have to think because the tenants can just decide to go bankrupt or just to withdraw from the lease agreements based on the rules that the lease agreements have independently of the force majeure situation. So certainly there is a strong turbulence about these issues, whether to suspend the payments or even to withdraw from agreements in all directions. And I think also there's a general pause in the market because my feeling is that the homework is being done on ongoing projects, like the contracts are being negotiated, the due diligences are being, but I think people, at least for some time, still will be refraining from signing the final binding agreement exactly with the understanding that there should be a price drop. That's my opinion about the situation.
Yeah, we have exactly the same. Well, I think what concerns force majeure, all the markets are pretty much similar, and that's quite broad spread. The term doesn't actually apply in a situation as per se, but there's a resemblance to the force majeure situation, and that this is what the lawyers are using right now, producing certain kind of argumentations to give people possibilities. But we have seen so far, this way, we have seen still the economical part work. So the most of the agreements have been either agreed between the parties or will be agreed in the future. So there hasn't been no drastic measures we could see. So that's still to see if there will be something which should be enforced to linger. So yeah, that's still the start of it.
Maybe a short comment on Poland. We've conducted a short survey among current developers at the end of the March, and we see that more than 60% of our developers have seen that their clients are raising force majeure as a purpose to negotiation or even exiting the transaction of purchasing the apartment.
That's the reality. I think that's in every market, because the first wave was very emotional. So when the restaurants and the hotels had to go close the businesses, basically everybody else was coming back and saying that we want also reductions. So but that's mostly emotional. So it is not much arguments. A lot of the landlords will agree to that, obviously, because you rather keep your tenant than and give some kind of reduction for the certain period than let them leave. So probably this will self-regulate in major part, and then there will be smaller issues with really big, indebtedness.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to the other topic. So the financing and the bank policy, if I could start a bit on our side. So of course there are two sides. There is one financing for the business and financing for the private person. So what concerns business, banks are saying that the situation hasn't changed much, and the good projects and the good developers will get the financing, and the ongoing projects and the ongoing contracts, probably the terms will not be overlooked or changed. At least that's last week's situation, but it changes quite rapidly. So so far for the financing for the businesses hasn't changed much, but for the new projects, I think the banks are trying to cool down the market, and the developers themselves are not applying much or not applying at all, even for the new developments, and because everybody wants just to wait this quarantine time. If it will finish, well, in Lithuania it's 27th of April as of this day, but I think it will be postponed until the beginning of May, should be. So then there will be more clearer picture if the projects will move on or no, and the talks with the banks are very, very individual. What concerns private people financing, we hear, we cannot well confirm, but what we hear from our customers, that the terms are changing. Depends on the bank. So where we have 3 major banks working in Lithuania, except of smaller Scandinavian banks, except of smaller local ones. So the policies are more or less similar. So if you come from a sector that could be hit, a job could be hit by the quarantine, then your terms will be overlooked. And what concerns new financing, there could be some radical changes. So it's not good for the market, but the people are also waiting, and they do not want to take the opportunity in this very, very, very unstable situation until the quarantine is over. Then there will be a clearer picture, I guess. So yeah, we have talks with the banks very often, and our governmental support actually comes through the banks. And what I didn't say about our help for our business, it's we have a special fund. It's called Invega, and through this fund comes the financing both for the small businesses, and also the fund. There is an idea to build a fund for the financing the big businesses, maybe to buy out their shares or securities, and we are still in the talks building this schema, but I think it's 2 months at least when it's going to be built. But the banks are looking forward to this, because this money will come through them, and then they are getting their systems ready, because they will be this intermediate between the government and the small and larger businesses. So far the situation is healthy. All the banks in Lithuania have announced that they will not pay the how it's called in English, dividends. Yeah, this year they will not pay the dividends, and will leave this money in the economies to make it as healthy as possible. So that's also a news to the market. And yeah, and our national bank, who is actually released has led to release some capital for the banks. It gives the opportunity for the banks to have more capital for financing. We're also looking at the situation very, very closely, and if there's some need to step in, I think this will happen. What concerns alternative financing, well, I think it's still too small and too early to compare with the possibilities of a major financing schemes from the commercial banks.
Mm-hmm.
That's our view.
Yeah. Well, in Latvia, regarding financing, there are 2 points I'd like to make. The first is that I think our government has reacted quite swiftly, and our state financial institution called Altum, in cooperation with commercial banks, is providing various financial instruments to companies, including real estate companies. These include credit guarantees, working capital guarantees, and this is already working. So this is the good news. But regarding the banks, and the second point, what are developers, and I think people in Latvia are generally cautious of, is this. I mean, okay, we are in the first month, the second month of the crisis, and banks, especially big banks, are providing, credit holidays, and basically the idea is that you can avoid paying the principal and you pay only the interest on loans. But I mean, as the situation continues, and perhaps the restrictions regarding COVID are released, but the economic, let's say, stagnation continues, we are afraid that the banks could use, banks and various, let's say, non-banking actors who have provided loans, could use this situation to take advantage of both private persons and companies, and let's say just take over apartments, development projects, and which was a very sort of big problem for Latvia, and I believe other Baltic countries during the previous crisis, where basically banks just took apartments and various development projects from the businesses and people, and then sold these assets at discounted prices, which really affected deleteriously our real estate business. The good news is that banks, especially Swedbank, as if apologizing for its behavior during the last crisis, announced very big headlines, credit holidays for everybody, and so, but still. It's a question, and this is something we are lobbying for now, is that these sort of credit holidays, I mean the ability to delay the payment on the principal and pay just the interest, this is not mandatory. It's not required by emergency law. So bank can decide whether to grant you this or not. And this is, I think, as we move forward, perhaps not today, but in 2 months, 3 months time, when the let's say the COVID subsides, but the economy has not picked up yet, that presents a clear danger, I think.
Yeah, I can add that what the government did for the banks was they lowered the liquidity criteria, and also this government agency, development agency, Altum, is providing guarantees for bad debts so that the banks don't have to requalify those and make extra accruals. So at least the cost of the existing loans is not increasing for the banks, and that's the support that government has provided so far. But as for the new lending, I think in Latvia, even before this crisis, the biggest problem with especially private persons borrowing was their precautiousness. The people had a too heavy lesson from the previous crisis that the public was cautious in borrowing, although the banks were welcoming to issue the mortgage loans for new apartment developments. So obviously this will not somehow help to increase the optimism and reliance of potential borrowers. So there should be some extra instruments for supporting lending after the crisis. Otherwise, it's not very active and not expected to become more active as a result of all this.
Yeah, one thing one of our members has suggested is that if you are, let's say, a serious developer who invests in a very sort of energy efficient and very sustainable development, perhaps you can get some government-backed loans, for instance. But that's just a dream scenario. But I mean, but still, for instance, there are developers in Latvia who have received loan. I know a particular case for an office development from the European Investment Bank. So there is sort of some opening for for finance, some sort of government-backed financing for real estate, in special cases at least.
Okay.
Okay, so I can tell you guys that regarding financing. So first of all, for all measures, our national bank lowered the interest rates to make the loans a bit cheaper. It's close to zero at the moment. It's 0.5 or 0.75 in different cases, different scenarios. So it's really low. And they announced that they will keep it very, very low for a long time. There has been announced some liquidity criteria. They will be lowered down. It's not announced yet officially, but everyone is sure it's going to happen. And also they're going to pump extra money within the market to provide more liquidity to the companies and to the credit institutions. We are a bit worried about that because this extra is actually printing more money. So we expect some inflation to go up by that. It's 25 billion euros, which is going to be pumped, which is kind of risky, but hopefully it's going to help in the short term. And then talking about the situation with the banks right now. So speaking of the credits, the loans for the companies, most of the banks understand the situation. So they are talking with the companies. They are ready to roll the credits, to extend the payments periods, or to give some kind of holidays, the installment holidays for some time. And it's happening not only for the retail sector, which is kind of obvious at the moment, but also for other companies which are having problems to pay the debts at the time. The same is happening with the individuals. So banks announced voluntary, not obligatory, but voluntary credit holidays. And if you file a motion to a bank, they will have a look on this, and already 500,000 people actually filed motions to the bank to receive the credit holidays, not to pay the payments for 1, 2, or 3 months. They will pay only the interest, or they will pay some extra money later on. So it's not it's just the extension of the time. And within the new credits, that's interesting. So the Polish banks are still financing new projects. We've seen just few new projects being financed within the last 2 weeks, but that's more than we expected. We thought that there will be no new financing, that any agreement that was not signed will not be signed. But still, some of the banks granted the credits, and we started. Some of our developers started new constructions, which is a good sign. So we hope now it's going to be only better. And within the individuals, so most of the banks required more LTV, the minimum amount of the money that the buyer has to put by themselves. Now it's pretty much every bank requires at least 20% of the value of apartment to be paid in cash by individual. Some of the banks are asking as high as 40%, but that's extraordinary. 20% is the standard at the moment, and we expect that this will be the standard for upcoming months or maybe years, or a year or so. So 20%. We are talking to the government about providing some guarantees for young people or for families which will struggle to collect 20% of the cash to pay for the apartments. And the same with leasing. So leasing companies are giving the holidays for payments for individuals and for the companies. So pretty much everything is pushed by 2-3 months with the payments. Of course, if you file a motion and if you ask for that, not everyone gets the agreement. Sometimes the banks or the leasing companies says like, okay, you are not in a critical situation, you still can pay. But basically the financing sector is they're stable, I would say. Of course, they are skeptic, but not very pessimistic. I guess that's all. Okay, sorry, alternative financing. So that's the biggest problem and the biggest risk we can see. A lot of real estate deals or real estate projects were financed by bonds, which were sold on the private market. They were bought mostly by financial institutions, some investment funds, or even the individuals. And this is the part of the market that will have problems. So investors are not very willing to extend the deadlines for the payments. So most of the companies that have the time that they will have to buy out the bonds, the cover bonds during this year, they will face big problems to find new investors to roll the debt within this year. So that's pretty much the biggest problem right now. Okay.
I think the market's a bit pretty, we were pretty similar situations. And what comes to the banks here, I do agree. They try to find solutions here as well. And the union of the banks just said last week that the applications for the payment holidays has been escalated, but it's still not anything massive. So there are no big changes on that things, and banks are trying to tackle this situation anyway. So the traditional banking, we haven't seen much changes, neither in interest rates, neither in conditions, but definitely yes, of course they're more cautious about signing agreements, and 70% of the payment holidays have been going to the private persons. So the companies are not as favorable situations as private persons, obviously, but that's only normal considering the client base. So that's what it is. I haven't heard about serious reductions in interest rates. I think what they have done in Poland is actually quite a good precedent, because in a difficult situation like this, it's probably really a good tool to reduce the interest, but as the interest rates have been very low for a long time already anyway, so there's not much room to go from there anywhere. So when the banks are raising money today, they are getting it on a negative interest, and they can provide quite a beneficial conditions to the clients as well. So that's what it is. What comes to the alternative financing, then it's traditionally been something which finances more problematic or with a higher risk level clients. So the expectations were actually quite grim. I spoke with one of the leaders of the major local crowdfunding companies, and they said they expected that there's going to be a wave of applications for the holidays or clients sending in problems, and it hasn't been the case. The investors, because for them the major issue would be if the bigger part of the investors withdraw their funds from the crowdfunding, but this hasn't happened. What they had was a couple of weeks when they started, there was a caution and postponing the decisions, but right now it's work as usual. So that's a positive from the lender's side, because the investors are still there. Now the question is, the alternative financing usually goes into the segments of development and the higher profit producing part of the market, when you can't really finance your cash flow in a crowdfunding. So the question of demand, the market demand is most important, whether you have something to develop or not, whether there is a client or not. So what they have thought is that the first to end up in the problems are the projects which have been orientated into very high price levels, because the market has been growing for a long time. So the expectation on an end selling price is I would say rather aggressive in many projects. But that's stabilized or balanced, so to say, on the other side by their policies, which have been not to finance more than 50–60% of these highly priced projects. So we will see the bigger part, and a bigger issue will be liquidity, and the liquidity of the market is something which is issue to all the finances. So if the liquidity ends or liquidity lowers, then obviously all the banks and everybody will come back. And one issue we wanted to tackle in this crisis was that we wouldn't like to see what happened on the last crisis, that projects were taken over by banks based on the asset value arguments, saying that the asset value declined below the certain level in the agreement, and even if the loan is serviced, you can apply, demands for additional guarantees or whatever. And that is something we want to avoid, because we want to give after the crisis, the players of the real estate market possibility to recover, to have their assets. What comes to the Martin's comment on a sustainable project, and I would say the proper tool or the right tool for these things actually are the so-called green financing and the green bonds. And this is not necessarily some crisis measure, but the green bonds are something which is quite strongly implemented everywhere now. So this is probably what will imply, and it'll give a certain kind of ease on interest, and clearly beneficially lower interest and longer terms. That's what has been sought. So we'll see if that intensifies here too. And what comes to the guarantees, then similarly to the Latvia and Lithuania, we have the structure called CREDEX, which has historically given guarantees to the young families, private persons, and home loans, and the requirements can be lowered as low as 10% of self-payment, everything else guaranteed by them. So this is something which carries on. And this is a tool to preserve the market activity, and we have applied from the association to get these guarantees broadened to enterprises also, so not just private persons, but also the legal persons. We'll see what the reaction will be. We haven't had any answer yet, but that's something we believe will help to preserve the market activity. Yep.
I just wanted to add regarding apartments. I had a discussion with one of our members, and what they're saying that they feel that this product called rent to buy. So basically, you start renting an apartment, and at some point you have an option to buy it, and part of the rent or the entire amount counts as a down payment. For the apartment, they feel that this will gain in popularity because it is less of an, let's say, restricting tool as a mortgage is. because you get a mortgage that's for life basically, and during these turbulent times, this kind of serves as a good surrogate for a mortgage. And also, just to your point, I mean, the work that Altum, our Credex is doing in Latvia is important. And what we have suggested to them is that they prioritize in their credit guarantees to private persons apartments which are simply energy efficient. Again, that's one kind of tool the government can use, because I mean, apart from this crisis, for instance, 72% of Rigans, so the inhabitants of Riga, live in Soviet-era housing. I mean, that's a kind of structural problem you have to deal with regarding climate change and other things. Okay.
This scheme, Martin.
Maybe Mindaugas can comment, because if I recall right, then either ECA or Hanner has actually implemented this rent-to-buy structures for a couple of years already. Do you know anything? How successful have they been on this? Because they have bigger volumes.
Yeah, I think Hanner was the most successful. They sold over a few hundred flats doing over on the scheme. Probably only one of their customers didn't get the financing, but it was some strange issue. But nearly 100% got the financing, and yeah, it was a successful tool for 4 or 5 years. And some smaller developers also picked up on that, but it was not so effective. I mean, for some not so liquid property, it was applied for some worse areas where the projects were developed. But the Hanner had this model done very, very precisely, and it was very successful, I would say.
They're doing that in Riga too, in Jaunā. Yes, they're actually in
Estonia it might be hardly possible because of cash flow. When you build or develop, you ask VAT within construction period. But when the building is completed, as soon as you rent apartment out, it means that you start to use it, and you have to pay this VAT to the state. So in respect of cash flow, it makes no sense.
Well, I know that Hanner has somehow tackled this issue successfully.
So it's the same legislation with you, yeah?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, I mean, this VAT issue regarding rent-to-buy arrangements, we have actually picked up this issue with the government, and 2 days ago I signed a letter to our Internal Revenue Service. So, I mean, but that's a kind of that's a taxation issue. But I mean, it just makes sense from the market perspective that it's a good alternative for taking the mortgage obligation just to rent and see how it goes. And if you can have some of the rent regarded as a down payment, I think it's a good deal for it, especially during these turbulent times.
But true, VAT is a problem here, because in Latvia they would treat this rent to sell as immediate sales. So you have to pay VAT on the whole price, although the cash flow is very low. So the VAT is actually a problem to this model.
Could you guys explain the very basic scheme, how it works? So basically the client pays the rent, which is actually included in the price after all, but then the interest on the capital is added to that, or how that works?
Yeah, approximately like that. Yes. They would pay the rent, and they would have the option to buy at a fixed price at some point, and then the rent is included.
2 years. I think it's 2
years. Yeah, 2 or 3 years.
And at the end of these 2 years, you have an option to buy. Basically, you're not obliged to buy, but you can choose to buy, and if you choose to do so, then the part of the rent you've paid is treated as a down payment.
Okay, do you know what part of the rent that has been already paid?
Well, I've heard of a scheme where 100% of the rent is treated as a down payment, but I believe it's not the industry standard. It's lower, but I don't have the exact figure.
Okay.
In Lithuania, why they started this scheme? It was because we have our national bank in 2011, after the last crisis, introduced this sustainable financing scheme, and under that you have to have a minimum 15% of down payment yourself. So for the young families, it was an issue because they couldn't borrow in like fast borrowing or other alternative financing, and they were left out of the market. So then companies started thinking, and they said, okay, let's accumulate your down payment over the, let's say, 2 or 3 years. And after this period, you go to your bank, and if you meet the requirements after these 2 years, then you are given a loan, and this rent that has been paid to the developer is presented as a down payment, and it's a legal thing. So okay. That was the case why they started. It was this requirement, minimum 15% for down payment, because before that you could get financing not like 15 down payment, 85 from the bank. You could get like 100 or 110% if you do evaluation correctly from your bank. So this tool was introduced. I think it was a very good tool, very good thing for the market health and for the financing. So yeah.
But okay, it's not there anymore.
Sorry?
It's not existing anymore, this scheme.
It is. It is.
It is, okay.
Yeah,
so basically all the money that has been paid for the rent are included or are treated as a down payment.
Yeah, they are accumulated. Okay. They are treated like one pool of a down payment. Yeah, and the bank accepts it.
But the developer is obliged to lower the price by the amount that has been paid for the rent? No.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
This accumulated payment is treated as a part of the housing price.
Of the price, okay.
So in the end, yeah. So, I mean, this down payment, this rent to buy payment is a bit higher than the market rental, but because of the money value and all other things, but it's the solution for the people who cannot get down payment.
So the client basically pays only the interest on the capital that is involved for this 2 years by the developer.
Yeah, the rent and the price of the capital. Yeah, you can say that. I can send you more info about this scheme. I mean, it's interesting. Scheme works quite well here. Okay, guys. So let's move on to the last two topics. We have half an hour left. No questions from the attendees so far. So okay.
That means that we are boring.
No, we're boring. Yeah. No. People are not. Yes, some people left.
Cheer up some.
Yeah.
We can
say
think
here that we expect the questions.
Yeah. I wrote in the.
Yes, in order to receive questions, you have to ask for questions.
It was in the program that Q&A session. There will be Q&A session in the end. Oh, okay. You guys are not boring at all. Audrius Šapoka. Thanks. Okay, guys. So let's move on to the governmental support. I would like to share one page with you. Now I'll share my screen. We as an association made this one place for the real estate market web page on our website. So in Lithuania, it says COVID-19 effect for the real estate market, and we try to put here all the legal acts, all the changes that during the quarantine the governmental institutions are doing. So this will help me maybe to present a bit what we are talking about with the government and what we are asking and what they are doing. So Ministry of Environment probably is the most active currently, and three things that we have reached agreement on them with was first of that is that you can do the finishing of the construction online, partly online, remotely. I mean, you don't have to gather all the company of specialists, like 10 people, to go around the building and so on. You can, well, some of them have to be there, of course, safety and so on. But some of them can do it online, sitting at their office or at home. You can stream it with the HD cameras. You can walk where they want, show the building, and this is approved. So this was introduced, I guess, 2 weeks ago, and a few buildings already passed through this scheme. So it works very well. Second one is presenting the project material to the society remotely. Also one remote thing, because in all the cases you have to announce publicly your project and do a public hearing, get the questions, give the answers, and so on and so on. So now you can do it fully online. And Vilnius, the capital city, introduced it a month ago. Now there's a law also a week ago introduced that you can do it in all the Lithuania, and all the procedures are written there. Third thing we are working with the ministry on is allowance to finish the building without finishing all the premises of the building, if I'm saying this right. Sorry for my English, but now you have to do 100% finishing to finish the building and to give it to the governmental commission. So now we're working that some of the premises could be not finished because the thing is you cannot do the finishing because of the lack of materials. We have a problem that some of materials from Italy, from Ukraine, even from Poland cannot arrive on time. And the building, which is leased or sold out, it cannot operate. And the big investments are stalled. So we are working with the ministry that there could be a temporary, maybe for a year time or so, possibility to let this finish the building not 100% finished. So it's the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Justice we're working about the electronic notaries that we talked earlier about. The Ministry of Environment, which is very important for us currently. As I mentioned yesterday, we reached an agreement in the government about the compensation for the rental, for the commercial rental. We are going with the closest model to Swedish one. So 50% of the rental for the businesses which are affected by quarantine gets financing from the government on the terms and on the prices that were in the February, so last invoice. The rest 50% is the split between the landlord and the renter. So the landlord has to give minimum 30% discount, and the rest 20% goes to the renting company, renter. So there are some practical things to discuss, but the political decision is made in the government. We still have to go to the parliament next or one week later, so we'll see how it goes. But more or less, the principal thing is this, and I think it's a very good thing for the market.
How large is the budget of this arrangement?
Yeah, good question. The budget of this arrangement is set for around 100 million euros for 4 months. We are counting that this scheme could work for the term of quarantine plus 2 months. We are discussing maybe 2 or maybe 4 months plus, but the government says maybe 2 months. So if we account that in Lithuania, all the rental of retail rent is 35-40 million euros, the same on top is offices. So I think the retail is mostly affected. So you can count that for a month, affected businesses will make, well, maybe half of that. So 100 million, up to 100 million euros for all the 4-month period or 5-month period. We'll see.
Just to precise, it is valid only for the retail that was closed by the government order, right? Or
No.
any kind of lease?
No. Not first and not the second. It in the middle. It's for all type of commercial lease which is affected by quarantine. Maybe not closed, but affected. I mean, if there's a significant drop, they will have to have the explanation in the law. We still don't have it. Significant drop in the turnover, then this scheme is taken into act. And it's for the retail, for all the commercial rent. So offices, warehouses, retail. Retail will be most affected, of course.
Well, congratulations on that.
Yeah, that's
Not
impressive.
Not yet.
No.
Not yet. We have a position every day from the.
So, but who has agreed to that?
Prime Minister and the government. I mean the Ministry of Environment and Innovations and the Prime Minister. So we still have to go to the Parliament, to the politicians, and we see how it goes there. But I think it's a good.
Do you have a specific law for that? You mentioned the law.
Yeah. We either have to change the civil code, or we'll have a special law. So when we have it, I can send you the to read it, of course, in Lithuanian, but it's easy to translatable. So yeah, the next one, Center of Registers, has introduced more and more tools to give services online and remotely. In Vega, this our thing, for the compensation of interest rates and all these future funds that they will be managing. All this support of the lease that I was talking before will also go through this in Vega fund. The municipalities, the important thing, government recommended the municipalities to not to charge the real estate and land taxes for the quarantine time and maybe some time after. So only one capital city, Vilnius city municipality, has agreed and made a decision on that. You can find it in this online link. Other municipalities hopefully will follow. It's not a big thing, but it's something. I mean, for this solidarity, and with this part, when you which you receive the compensation, you have to lower your rent for the tenant. So let's say if you get the compensation for real estate tax, you lower a bit. You split it between your tenants. Let's say if you're office or a warehouse, and they pay less tax. Yeah, there's more from our lawyers and so on and so on. So yeah, so mostly these things introduced for our sector, for real estate sector. I'm not talking for the economy in general. Our support plan, as the government announced next day after announcing quarantine, is up to 5 billion euros. 5 billion euros with the local and of course borrowed money, because as you were saying, the interest rates are negative now, and you can borrow quite successfully in the international markets. Our government has quite good ratings for the borrowing, so hopefully they will use this tool, and this money will reach our businesses. The problem is the pace. The pace is quite low, I would say, because we introduced the programs through Invega scheme, but the money still don't come. 2 or 3 weeks we have to wait. So hopefully it will go faster. That's one thing we are hoping most. That's from my side. Who wants to follow?
There's a lot. You have done a lot on this, and because we have implied to try to get similar eases. The first thing was actually the rent support as well from our side as well. If the government would support it 50%, then the conditions would have been that the landlord gives at least 25% ease to the tenant, and tenant has to pay at least 25% of the lease to be eligible for these measures. And I think it's quite reasonable. The question is if there are funds to cover that these months, and we yet don't know that anyway. So we'll also be waiting for the answers on these measures. What about the guarantees? I think that's would be the easiest to imply, just to broaden the guarantee eligible round from the private persons also to the enterprises. Then the CREDEX also provides small entity loans, which have been already said. Then the salary support was something which implemented quite fast, and that was done. Then from the Union of the Real Estate Companies, we also added to our letter a couple of points, one of them being the hostile takeover point from the banks during the lease agreements if the lease is serviced. And then one of the big issues which was on the table, but we couldn't really actually come to the unified solution on the wording was there's a lot of foreign workforce that has been actually sent home on certain conditions, and whose living permits hasn't been prolonged, etc., which in connections makes a problem to the rental apartment owners where they have been facilitated so far. So that was something where we thought that the government should ease certain kind of situations, like in a building industry, to allow these people still stay here and to earn their living, and hereby also to have the leased apartments they used. But that's,
I'm sorry, Ardi.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ardi, may I ask a question? So the government says that these people must leave if their permit are finished.
No, a lot of them have left already, and we're trying to find the wording how to ease this situation. But this is too early. That was some idea, and I wouldn't go to the specifics right now. But this is just one thing we discussed because we have seen it happening on a certain level. So we'll see what it is. And the last thing what I noticed from the Poland as well was that if you had this very drastic measure not to pay even the services, the big infrastructural enterprises, we have tried in a couple of occasions. Some of our members have tried actually send a letter and to apply for eases on communal costs. I mean, utility costs and the measurable costs, which is clearly something that could be provided, and it's more not as much legal as economical measure. And so far the answers have been that sorry guys, but we won't do that. That you use your electricity, so you have to pay. So the first answer from our side was, one of the member side was that, guys, but your profitability level is about 20%. So give us just that, for the time being. And they were, no, sorry, we have to keep on investments. So we can't do that either, which sounds kind of strange in a situation where we are right now.
Just to precise, because I think I was misunderstood. So Polish regulation says that the tenant is not obliged to pay for the lease itself and for the service fees during the lockdown, but still the owner of the shopping mall still have to pay them for the utilities, still have to pay the property tax, still have to pay electricity and so on to the private companies which are providing all the utilities. So so just to clear that up.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're afraid of, because in these cases you have a zero cash flow from the tenant side, and you still have to carry on with all the expenses on a level the prices what the market is, and then when you turn to these really big partly governmental companies which provide you the services, they're going to tell you that, sorry guys, but we have to keep our profitability up, and so we can't give you any eases. That's the strange part of it. But anyway, that's also a new measure we just thought about pointing out, and we'll see how the reaction will be in coming weeks to be. So yeah, I think we have worked on a pretty similar measures on all markets, as I have understand so far, and we'll see how efficient this is. I think still the best solutions to all that is that this guarantee ends as fast as possible and we return to the normal business. That's wishful thinking.
I mean, just to use this quarantine as an opportunity, we've suggested some of the things that Mindaugas talked about. For instance, this commissioning of new buildings. I mean, this is basically a tradition when sort of committee from the construction board and various institutions just come to inspect a finished building, even though all the certifications are there. And so it's basically a tradition you can easily get rid of because it serves no real purpose. Because I mean, okay, they can check if the water is running or, you know, electricity is connected, but that's basically, you know, it's not substantial. Mm-hmm. So, and also we have proposed that this public consultation process can be carried out electronically, and I'm pleased to hear that our colleagues in Lithuania are ahead of that, because I mean, if you can't have a public gathering, obviously you cannot have a public consultation, both for territory planning and for construction proposals, and so I mean, about this rental support schemes, we've discussed that. I mean, I'm personally slightly skeptical that our government would buy that, because somehow the idea is that let's say the cash dispensation goes to the most vulnerable part of the society, to people who risk losing their jobs, and support for the companies is more like of a kind of financial instruments nature, not direct cash injections, which this rental scheme is. But I mean, some of our members have brought it up. But one thing which we have suggested and actually have received a positive initial feedback is, again, regarding these credit holidays. I think there is a case to be made that these credit holidays are mandatory for the period of the crisis plus 3 months, because that would essentially mean that let's say the big financial institutions take the hit, not the small or medium businesses which rely on loans to finance their operations. And if it's mandatory for the bank to grant the extension of the principal payment of the principal of the loan, I think that would solve a lot of problems for the businesses. Basically, all problems, provided this crisis is over in 3 or 4 months.
But to briefly list the supportive measures that are more or less real estate related, then also we have this salary payment support, which was initially only available for the affected industries, but now if you prove a drop of your income, then you can apply for that. I also mentioned already the guarantees so that the bank loans don't become bad and more expensive. In rental part, you may be lucky if your landlord is a government or a government-owned entities, because those or municipalities, because they would give you rental holidays for this period if you are among the affected industries. But there are no effects or regulations as for the private landlords, and in that case, sense they are both the tenants and also the landlords are slightly discriminated. But as Martin said, the focus is on the mostly vulnerable parts. So real estate, I think, is not on the first in the agenda. It's believed to be a very rich business, and I think that's going to be politically difficult to get compensation to Swedish investment funds. That's going to be a challenge if we would raise that.
So just to give you a short overview of Poland. So, well, the regulations are changing, and we already had a few changes in the epidemic regulations. The first one was to stop any procedures, administrative. So that would mean that we couldn't get the permission for use that Martin's mentioned. The same, there was no inspections on the building sites and so on. But we are working on that. And right now, the second amendment is already proceeding. The third amendment should be announced next week, and we are working closely with the government. So basically, we are kind of working with the procedures. We should be back on the tracks within 1 month, I would say, or maybe even closer, maybe 2 weeks. In the economic terms, which are more interesting, I believe, we have pretty much no chance to receive any support of rents. And of course, we ask for this kind of measures, but we do not really expect them, that the government will help in any way to the tenants or to the landlords. There is some salary support, but it's only coming for the smallest enterprises, and it's not really a big one. It's 40% of the salary for the businesses that were hit by the COVID-19. So like, of course, the groceries or the shopping mall, the stores at the shopping malls, which were closed, restaurants, and so on. So that's pretty much all. Right now, we are talking with the government on the financial measures, but probably it's going to be focused on bank guarantees for providing a lot of liquidity to the market, and maybe some tax reliefs, but only in terms of a property tax, or, for example, for the development companies that you can actually, if you have made a loss during last year, you can calculate it in more years when you have a profit. So it will be small tax reliefs. We're also talking about some measures to invite people to invest money into real estate as one of the safest sectors, so to invest in residential real estate mostly. And we hope to receive the income tax relief for the individuals that would buy apartment for rent. So that's the most probable scenario at the moment. Pretty much that's all. I mean, we have a list of 50 amendments that we are discussing with the government at the time, but I believe it's not really that interesting to other countries. The financial measures, I believe, are the most interesting to everyone.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I just want to say that it was not so easy to talk with the government about this scheme of lease compensation, because it started with the French model, and the French model is the solidarity model, where the agreement is freezed. You get no payment from the tenant for the quarantine time and maybe a few months after, and you just prolong your contract after that. You get it as a bond. So it's nothing. But we were able to talk and convince that it's not support for the real estate business, but it's support for the small tenants, which are not able to survive, and they are in the chain, in the whole economic chain, where the landlords will be affected in the second hit, because we are not asking any support from the government currently, and we are declaring that. But if this big group of tenants will go bankrupt without paying the rents, and some of our companies are depending on the rents, it's their main business and only business. So these companies will last what, 2, 3, 5, 4 months maximum. So this will gonna end very, very badly. Okay, guys. So it's 5 o'clock, and we have a dessert. Yeah. So please share your visions and view for the future. Maybe not for the health topic. Nobody knows. Yeah, we are all expecting for this to end as quickly as possible. We in Lithuania, we see that maybe we have reached the peak already of the virus infections, more or less. So that's why we are using some restrictions on the business. But as I was saying, the coming out term of this quarantine will be quite long and heavy. So what we're doing, we are supporting our medical staff as much as possible because they are in the front line, and that's what we must do. But please share your visions. What's going to happen with the real estate sector? How is going? Maybe we can look not like a few months after, but maybe a year after. How is going to change? How the retail is going to look? How the co-working is going to be when we'll not be maybe shaking hands or shaking hands with I don't know, remotely, and so on. So yeah, jokes apart, but what's your view? Maybe someone is brave to start.
Okay, I might start. So we do expect that the number of sold apartments will drop down by at least 30% this year. That's our internal expectations. At the same time, unless there will be an inflation. So there's this one call which might change the market. If the inflation will start to rise, then people will invest in real estate. But still 20 or 30% of the drop in number of sales will not be that bad because we will also stop new projects. Looking at 2008, 2009 crisis, the sales dropped down by 30% within 12 months, and the new projects dropped down by 70%. We expect that something similar might happen, but not that deeply. This time it's not this time we see the enemy, and it's called COVID-19. We can visualize it. We know how it looks like. So I guess that as soon as the confidence will come back to the market, this crisis will be shorter. It won't be that long. That's our beliefs. The office market, pretty much, we expect that to be freezed pretty much. So we won't see a lot of new transactions. We'll see extending the agreements that are running at the moment. Probably most of the companies will extend the leases where they are, of course, expecting some lower rents. Probably that we'll see the same what happened in Hong Kong or Singapore, which is already phased there, which means 5 to 10%. That lowers the rents for the offices are 5 to 10% lower. Warehouse market will grow. That's probably everywhere. The e-commerce is booming. It's going great. Hotels, of course, that's the worst part of the real estate. And to be honest, we think that it will require a huge government support. We are already talking to the government, and they are actually thinking of giving to every citizen kind of a voucher for the tourist services of 250 euros that you could use during this year just to boost the tourist economy. It's not confirmed yet, but probably it will happen at some terms. But still, of course, it all depends on the epidemic situation and if we'll be able to come back to hotels, to large gatherings within upcoming months. Co-working, second after the hotels from the down of the list, I would say. Probably co-working will see a lot of problems. They had a short-term lease agreements with small companies. A lot of them will withdraw right now. They will terminate contracts. So that's a big risk to the market. That's also a big part of the rental market in Poland, like WeWork. Probably everyone in the market is expecting that WeWork will go bankrupt anyway. Within next month, so it's not a secret that everyone has these fears, and probably we'll see a lot of companies going bankrupt. The co-working companies. I'm not sure what's the situation in the other countries. In Poland, a lot of co-working companies are owned by the office developers. So they will be able to support them. They will be able to help them with the business. Probably some of the office spaces taken by the co-working will be transformed into a normal offices, and they will be rented out for the lower price, of course, during this few months. And what else?
And maybe adding to Konrad, according to the survey that we made, as I mentioned at the beginning, among our developers, the purpose.
It's actually a great material.
Maybe I can show it, but it's only in Polish, unfortunately, the chart I want to add. So here on this chart, we
no, just let's translate it. Let's translate it to the guys.
Let's so maybe only translation. The more orange, the more developers are afraid of it. So here you can see the more orange is being afraid of delays in the construction site. So the developers associated in our association are not afraid of losing liquidity, but more of delays in their investments. They are not afraid of collapsing their enterprises. And what's more,
just to add one comment to this, we believe it will change. So that was the first reaction to COVID-19 when the lockdown was announced. Everyone was afraid if that will affect the building sites. Right now, we are going into the second phase, which means, okay, the building sites, we're going to deal with that somehow. But the problem is if there will be buyers and if there will be a confidence in the market, of course. So this survey was made almost 2 weeks ago. I believe right now we would receive slightly different answers.
And maybe finishing, more than 60% of developers are afraid of collapsing of prices of apartments and rents and so on. And it's quite optimistic. Only 1% of developers are afraid of bankruptcy. So maybe that's
good confidence.
Yeah. I think one concept that will go bankrupt after this crisis is working from home. I mean, all the people I've been talking to, I have a friend who had to spend in self-isolation 14 days with her small child. I mean, one thing she appreciates most in life now is having good office, just meeting with people and so. Of course, I mean, in terms of, you know, having like open office, high human density, that is a concept that will undergo some revision. But again, I think the idea is that, you know, everybody will work from home. You know, when everybody works from home, GDP drops by 20%. That's kind of your result. So I think, in contradiction to the popular view that this will have a deleterious effect on offices, I think companies will experience a renewed interest in having good office premises. But I mean, I just recalled I had when this crisis first hit, I had a talk with Mindaugas Statulevičius of Honor, who is a Lithuanian developer active in Latvia, and I asked him, what is the main thing you expect from the government now? And he said the main thing is just to fight the disease, so that this thing is over. I mean, because if this kind of continues, the halting of all economic activities, then I mean, no financial instruments, nothing will help. I mean, we just have to get through this, and this is a kind of, I think, the main sentiment shared among our members. Thank you.
Well, what comes, I think in market terms, we are pretty similar. We are moving on the same environment in all the markets. So expectations of something like 30% decline on the markets is quite realistic, because the reaction on the real estate business will be exaggerated against the real economic downturn. So we'll see what the effect will be there. And the prices are quite difficult to predict, because there's a lot of input that's going to change, even on the levels of salaries or building costs or something like this. So we'll see. Through the last crisis, we didn't see much decline on a building construction costs. That was very mild, and it started to grow right after the crisis. So I think something similar will happen there. Which means the end prices of the new product will probably stay on a similar level, and the decline will be temporary. But then again, we'll see, because there's a couple of aspects which we have to take account. First of all, there's going to be a massive supply of small apartments which have been worked on a short-term leases, and the owners have lost the confidence on this business after this crisis. So that will extend the supply on a certain period, probably will have influence. And then another aspect is people who lose salaries and have already either reserved something for the transactions or have been considering to buy something. So this is a fact which will take more than a year to recover. That's what we're looking probably up to the end of next year. But how strong it is, we don't know. We are trying to actually focus right now into the segments and see where the growth is potential, and to really find out what could be the good part of the market. And one thing we have instantly seen is obviously self-standing sales premises with warehouses, and which changes the logistics. This trend has been ongoing for some years already. The e-commerce supported small warehouse / sales space. So probably that will have some kind of boost on a smaller premises, because people are downsizing just to sustain the crisis. Logistics has been struggling on a larger scale, because the accessibility of the goods and the orders have declined on a crisis, but we'll see what's happening there. Then we do expect the lease terms overall to be longer, which means that some short leases will disappear, and some of this stock will be given to long-term leases. And if the people lack the power to buy a new apartment or home, then they probably go on a leasing market. So there's going to be a certain boost on the leasing market from the long-term agreements. How big it's going to be, and if it's enough to really recover or give an alternative to the short-term leases, I don't know, but I doubt. So the small sizes, the micro apartments, which have been very popular last years, I think that's going to be taking a hit, and it already has taken some hit. E-commerce is doing quite well. One thing what just popped through my head is probably we should look at the contactless hotels, because this product is on the market actually existing already. So there are hotels which can exist without meeting any people, and that's something which can be made more comfortable or less comfortable and cheaper, whatever you like. So that's probably one of the surviving sectors, and one of the sectors which should look how to really do that. But that obviously means that the borders have to be open, and the internal tourism has to be more confident. But this will happen. We still are talking about the virus, which means in a certain realistic time period we're going to see a cure, and then sometime after that we're going to probably see a vaccine. So that's going to happen anyway. So that's and I do agree on a co-working. That's a bad sign. The WeWork has already given a lot of bad signals, because of probably just some things they did internally wrong. It's not a bad concept itself, but I think there's going to be struggling people probably will have problem going back to the office where they have 100 people they don't know. So you rather have the office where you gather with the people you know. So that's probably one of the things the struggle indeed. And then again, I think there's a lot of work to be done on healthcare, because pharmacy is okay, you know, everybody needs medicine, but this crisis has proved that the health centers can operate properly. That means, you know, something's wrong. So there has to be a certain kind of solution, also contactless services, you know, whatever it's going to be, and that probably will be changing. But this is you know, this is if I had a crystal ball, just trying to get our head around this crisis and who could be the possible winners, because we can easily everybody be losers if we don't do anything.
I think that people are saying that the world will be different after this crisis. I personally don't believe too much in the nature of a human that it can be changed, but there will be some effects. Like, for example, this e-commerce. Now, a lot of people who never did that, now they are forced to do that, and they might find it quite comfortable. So that will grow, and that's bad news for the shopping centers, for sure. I believe retail will not go up after this. And about the offices, I don't quite share Martin's optimism about that, because a lot of tenants were caught with this heavy burden of office and not being among those directly affected industries. They understand that that's a heavy financial burden. And in Riga, we have a situation that we are not actually using offices, but that we are forced to pay the rent. So I think there will be thinking of reducing the office cost, which might mean that there will be open space concept with less working space, places than the number of employees. I think there will be something thinking in that direction. The fancy big offices in the center of the city might have some decline. That's my personal belief.
Mm.
Yes, I totally agree that this open office concept will change. First of all, offices become smaller, and the second thing is that they most probably will be more separated. Yes, that you don't sit in a room where there are 20 people. It's a huge difference right now if there is 5 people in the room or 20 people. Yeah, and another thing is that business traveling. Yes, it will have certain influence on hotels for sure. And again, the same micro apartments for short-term rent, that most probably this business traveling going to change. And also in Estonia, we saw that prefabricated houses is becoming more and more popular. Right now, this according to last interviews, this producers of prefabricated houses, they're very afraid that their turnovers will go down within half a year up to 50%, because we depend a lot on Finnish, Swedish, and Norwegian markets. Yeah, but this trend as prefabricated from wood houses, I think that this trend gonna be stronger. So
okay, guys. So thank you very much. So much ideas. I don't know. If I should add anything from my side, I like your insights very much. I mean, nothing very super special to add from the Lithuanian side. Of course, we are happy that well, we do this questionnaires every week, and we talk with our members, and we ask them what's your what's your capability, what's your status, what's your economic situation, and we are happy that they announced that they don't plan to lay off their workers, that they are still planning to retain their workforce, and they are looking forward to come back in the summer, to come back at the smaller scale, but they are not laying off not one person, at least most of our companies. And some of them are saying that we will not reduce the salaries until autumn, some of them until the end of the year. So that's a strong signal for the market. Of course, not all of them can have the comfort to say this and be this brave, but some of them are, and this gives some confidence. If to look year ahead, it's very difficult to say. I'm currently studying also this lot of info about the WeWork business model and if it will go bankrupt or no. But with our local specialists, we talk that if the WeWork will have bad times and it had plans to expand to the Baltics, probably it will never happen recently, at least. But IVG, yeah, the spaces operator, which is the strong Swiss company, probably will benefit of that, because WeWork made this concept popular, and now other strong players can step in and use it to their value. But how to do it, how to reduce this afraidness of a social interactions and being with, as you were saying, 20 different people, strangers in the room, it's gonna be tricky. The housing, we see that more and more rural tourism is getting popular, and the individual housing in the regions. That's natural, because people want to run away and to stay with their families. But that's probably a short-term thing for the quarantine and some time afterwards. The housing, the residential, the condominiums, of course, they will get back. Maybe not in this volume as earlier, but in a half year or so, we're expecting more optimism. Of course, it's very close and very tied to the financing options. If the banks will survive and they will be healthy, then we will move on. Okay, so I don't know. I think we finished quite optimistically. I mean, as much as we can do in this uncertain times. We nearly 2.5 hours on this webinar, and we have 27 attendees here, and on the YouTube 20 people watching. So guys, nearly 50 people are listening to us, so hopefully we're not so boring here. Thank you very much for your valuable time. It was really nice to see you all. Nice to meet our Polish colleagues. I haven't met them in person. Also Anton, Ivars.
Hopefully very soon.
Yeah, so we will. Yeah, let's do this next meeting maybe in a few months live in Warsaw on top of some skyscraper, and then push some optimistic news. But so far, I wish you all be safe, be strong, be healthy. But that's most important. To let your families be healthy, and let's stay in touch. Let's share information. We can share our analytics, our thing that we are working on with the government. Please share yours. And sometimes we hear from the government that, oh, it's a new thing, nobody does that. But as I heard today from the Ardi, it's a great news for the notaries, electronic notaries signing, and maybe the Polish guys could use some experience from our work with the Ministry of Environment and other things. So let's work together. Let's work hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder, and this will all be good. Let's hope sometime soon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys. So
thank you very much, Mindaugas.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Be safe.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.